let me get into your story. Tell me what happened. Tell me your background in financial services. How did you get started?
I thought it might be fun to read you a poem that I wrote. It's my resume in poetry form. So is that okay if I read that poem?
It's a retire sooner first, so absolutely.
All right. Story of my origin from my heart. Once upon a time in a faraway land called Wisconsin, a baby girl was born in the midst of a blustery blizzard. Her parents named their child Kathleen. That's me, and this is my story. Childhood on family farms, constant chores, caring for animals, crops, and catastrophes, squabbling parents, money short, receiving valedictorian scholarship, being family's first college grad. Ooh, was that your escape? Public schools teaching, wiggly first graders and sassy teens, studying for PhD same time, defending my thesis, opening new doors with that golden key. Oh, I thought you loved being a school teacher. Hello, university faculty status. Diving into academic teaching, fast track tenuring, changing abruptly, pivoting, leaving ivory tower colleagues. How could you go? New challenges at nonprofits. Urging folks to open hearts and wallets, raising money for charities, learning new skills, making a difference. Was that the game changer? Real financial advisors. Flourishing 18-year business as CFP, helping folks with money, focusing on surviving spouses after husband's death, publishing Moving Forward on Your Own, a financial guidebook for widows. Well, what came next? Encore Career launched, selling RFA business, speaking, writing, researching, empowering widows, crisscrossing country for 300 presentations. Then you're retired? Now refired, not vintage retirement. Centering on 5 F words: family, fun, focus, purpose, friends, and fitness, body, mind, spirit, and money. Creating a lasting legacy. Being a writer and nonprofit ambassador. Fantastic chapter.
I love that. I particularly love the F words. Did you forget one of the F words?
Family, fun, focus, purpose, friends, and fitness. 5.
Again, coming from a house of 4 young boys, you're going to hear another F word from time to time. Jake, don't say that. Okay, so let's get to that's. I think it's the first poem I've heard when it comes to kind of your trajectory over time, and it's a really cool way to do it. So thank you.
I'd set the pace that way.
I think it's I love it. Well, gosh, so you really did. I love that you grew up on a farm, first of all, in Wisconsin. And it is constant chores. There's constant work.
Never done.
Everything's easier after you leave the farm, isn't it?
Yes.
And what kind of farm was it? It was a dairy farm or what?
It was the first farm that I lived on. It was really with my uncle, and my dad was working with him, and they had conflicts after a couple of years and left. And then I was in Madison for a while, and then we moved back to a farm. And it was only about 100 acres, and part of that was woods. And Dad was a letter carrier for the post office. My mom worked as a secretary in town at the university. So they had their day jobs, but it was the farm. And it was, they raised, when they first started out, they had a few hogs and cattle and even chickens, but we got rid of the chickens. It's too much work. And the pigs, we ate them all. And the cattle, Dad got into a land grant bank program where he didn't have to grow corn so much, and it was a good deal for him financially. And we kept a few cattle that we raised, beef cattle, but it wasn't dairy cattle that we raised. And we had some horses and a donkey and lots of dogs and cats. And
yeah, it sounds a little bit like where I grew up. There's always something. There's always something to do.
But I knew I was not going to have that be my lifestyle. So when my boyfriend, as a senior, proposed marriage, he said, "Now you can go off to college and get your teacher's degree, and then we'll get married afterwards and come back and we'll take care of my sheep." And I just thought to myself, never, never. I'm not going to wind up living on this kind of a farm forever. I'm going to go off and do something different.
So you were a teacher, and then
Yes.
you became a professor,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
What were you teaching, and then what were you professing?
It was education. People say, you'll get a PhD. Oh, it's probably in economics or business. No, it was education. I'm a teacher at heart. So it was education. So when I was a professor, I was working with mainly young women who were going to be teachers also.
And so you were teaching teachers. Okay.
Yes.
And then so then you ended up in the financial business. How did you do that? And then how did you end up, like, how did the focus become widows? And how much of your practice was that? Tell me that story.
All right. College professor. And
Age.
I took my first position about 30.
Yeah.
I had marched through, I was about 30 years old. And I got tenure. And my colleagues thought I was nuts when I left, because once you get tenure, it's like, ooh, you're set for life. They could never get rid of you. But it was just like, I was restless. It's like there's more to be done. I can do more. And I had taken a job with National Healthcare Foundation in Washington, D.C. That's where I was living at the time. And I really didn't know a lot about the job when they took it. They hired me kind of on a lark because they figured that I could do it, and they'd fired the guy before me.
Kathleen will figure it out.
Yeah, right. So it was fundraising basically, and I was doing annual fund and that kind of thing. And then I discovered this field called planned giving, where people were making large gifts through their estate planning, and through trusts, and I started going to conferences and learning more about that. And that's where I really cut my teeth on this financial stuff. And my boss said, I think it would be good if you got another credential so that you could interface with these donors, because I was working with their attorneys, with their CPAs, with their financial advisors, with their wealth management professionals, and I wanted to speak the same language. And I discovered, there's this certified financial planner program out there. So I started taking it and going very, very slowly through the program. And so by the time, and that did it, it helped me to bring in more gifts for the organization. And I was really intrigued by the whole thing. And my boss expected me to bring all of the gifts to that foundation that I was working with. So I was working with rich docs, and they were making these, we set up charitable remainder trusts and gift annuities and all kinds of other planned gifts. And he expected me to bring the gifts in. But yet I was talking to these people, and they were interested in the symphony. They were interested in the colleges where they graduated from, in the medical schools that they had attended, and they wanted to make those part of the gifts. So I thought, I really need to sit on the same side of the table as the donor, not the foundation. And I guess that means I need to be a financial planner.
Yeah. So
I segued, I left that job and started my own business. It was going to be just a small boutique business because.
So out of the gate, so you never worked for a big financial services firm.
No.
But you got your CFP and said, hey, I'm going to go start my own firm.
Yes. And that was the day when to get a CFP, they counted my work as a development officer as experience. They don't count that anymore. You got to go, put your dues in working for another firm. I interviewed with some brokerage firms, and when I found out what I was going to, I couldn't share articles, say, from the Wall Street Journal without approval, and I had to push certain products, and it was that's not the way I want to work. So I decided, I established my own RIA, and I was independent, and the goal was just going to be to get one client a month. And my husband and I led a very simplified lifestyle, so I didn't have to make big bucks. And so then when I opened my shop.
And now where were you? Were you in Florida at the time? What state were you in?
By that point, I was in Ohio.
Okay.
And I was married to a man who was a Lutheran pastor. He worked for Capital University in development work also, so he wasn't a parish pastor at that point. But he knew a lot about all these planned gifts, and I learned a lot from him. So he was encouraging me to do this work also.
How old were you when you got married?
Well, I know I started my business when I was about 50, so late 40s when I married this man. It was not my first marriage. My prior marriage had ended in divorce, and so this was the next marriage.
Got it.
And all right, so because he moved in circles with Lutheran clergy, and because I was doing some consulting work for a major Lutheran organization, I had contact with pastors. They all knew me in that circles. And so at that point, I decided to specialize because there was an article that came out that said, you got to have, I think it was a white paper, forgotten the guy who did it, but Bob Veery's touted this. You got to have a niche to survive. Otherwise, you're just not going to make it. So I said, okay, better get me a niche. It's going to be working with pastors. So, because as you know, clergy have some very, very unique kinds of plans. They've got their tax-free housing allowance. They can get their 403B money out in retirement, totally tax-free, if they structure it correctly. There was just, all kinds I could help them negotiate their compensation package. There was just all kinds of things I could do.
So you became a financial expert for clergy.
Yes.
Wow, I've never heard of anybody doing that niche.
That's why Mutual Funds Magazine, which is now, they went out of business, but I think it was 1999, they named me in the top 100 planners in the whole country. Go figure. Because my specialty was in clergy planning and charitable giving.
Wow.
And I started at that point, that when I took new clients on, I said, I will give you a 10% discount on what my fee, because I charged a fee for like a retainer for the whole year. Here's what your fee is going to be.
Hourly, like a flat fee.
Flat fee this covers the whole year. It covers tax, and at that time I did tax. I did their taxes even, estate planning, investments, budgeting, clergy planning kinds of things, everything that touched money. Okay, so I'll give you 10% reduction in what that fee is if you will give that amount to your, or are currently giving it to your favorite church or charitable organization. Nobody turned down that offer. Right. And so I got them started right on charitable giving from the get-go. All right, so I did that for a number of years, specializing in clergy. And I got up to the point that I think we had about 70 clients. I never took on another CFP, although I had requests to come on board, but I was just me. But I had a wonderful paraplanner that she was about 3/4 time. And then we had another person that would come in for some special, if we needed some special help, like getting ready to do a workshop and I needed to have materials put together. So did it all, loved it. And then it was 2006, it was December, that my husband and I got his diagnosis that he had cancer.
What is your late husband's name?
Tom.
So you guys were in your 50s.
No, he was quite a bit older than me. So he at that point, I was 59 years old, 59, and he was late 60s, early 70s.
And Tom was diagnosed with
liver cancer and was given a short amount of time to live. And February 12th, 2 days before Valentine's Day, when he was in my arms, he died. So it was a couple months after that diagnosis that he died. And then 5 weeks after that, my widowed mother died. And just less than a couple of years before that, my daddy had died.
So you had a ton of loss and
then
pain.
my cat died.
Come on.
So everything's like, whoa. And I experienced firsthand this widow's fog that I oftentimes talk about. That
yeah, you talk about widow's fog or widow's brain. Tell me, what is that? And I would let me couch this by saying, is it only for widows, or is this for widowers as well? Or is it really focused more on women?
The writing that I did back then, I spoke more about widows.
Tell me
And
about it.
the research that we did several years ago was focused mainly on widows. But now it's more correct to talk about surviving spouses, widows and widowers. But I have found that there are differences because after I went through my initial grief period and got back going, I changed the structure of my practice. So the only new clients I accepted were people who were widowed or who were working towards looking at that time ahead when one of the spouses would be gone. So the clients that I worked with, the differences that I saw, the guys were more about suck it up and be strong and I can handle it. And the women, not so much so. In fact, when I remarried much later, I married a widower, and we talked about the differences, how we both handled that initial grief phase. And my current husband is named Charlie. And I asked Charlie, okay, so after Anna was gone, did you get together with other guys and talk over a cup of tea and cry on each other's shoulder and listen to stories and be there to help handle the mail and everything? And he said, heck no. He said he would get together maybe with somebody just to slap each other on the back and have a beer and then go out and work with tools in the shed for a while, but would not talk about his feelings about losing Anna at all. So guys are the ones that I saw were more.
Yeah, guys
more
are different. It's going to be less tea, more beer. But what about though? Tell me about the fog. Tell me about the brain fog and how long did you have this?
All kinds of emotions. Swirling around. There's, denial. He can't really be gone. And I would sit in my house and I'd look at the door that he used to walk through, and I could just imagine him walking through that door and saying, "Oh, come on, we got work to do. What's everybody sitting around for?" Anger.
How long were you married to Tom?
We were coming up on our 20th anniversary because we had started talking about what we wanted to do to celebrate our 20th anniversary, where we were going to go, and we decided we were going to take a cruise. But that never happened. Anger, angry at myself. Why didn't I see the signs earlier? Why didn't I do this, do that? Or angry. Why did you leave me? Why? Loneliness. Tom and I were just super, super close. We did everything. He had been retired, but he helped me in the business. He loved taking the initial phone calls when people would phone in and want to talk about the business, and he loved talking with them. He loved lining up the seminars. I didn't think I could continue my business.
Oh, wow, without Tom.
Yeah, afraid. Just all these mixture of all kinds of emotions going on. And I stepped back from the business for just a very short time, and my clients were great. They said, take how much time you want. It's just fine. But I jumped back in, like within a week, I was back in the office. And the office was in the house. I had a very homey practice. We'd built the house specifically for this. The whole back end was glass from floor to ceiling, and it looked out over a beautiful lake. Because for a lot of people, finances is challenging. It's upsetting. It's bothersome. So I wanted a peaceful environment.
Yeah.
So this beautiful office was in there, and I got in there and I could get going and I could get lost in that because I understood the work. That made sense. The money, the plans, that all made sense. It was at the end of the day after the clients left when the house was so empty, when all this would come crashing in on me, and I would just usually go to bed crying my eyes out until I got up the next day and went into the office and
went back to work.
Yeah. My initial grief like that, it was really, really hard that first month. And then Mom died. And so I'm dealing with that too, but I'm slugging along. And thanks, my wonderful paraplanner, her name is Kathy. She picked up the reins and did a lot of extra things, and she was just there with me. I had several widowed lady friends. One gal, she'd come over sometimes in the evening and just bring her crocheting. And she'd just sit on the couch across from me and just crochet. And I'd just sit there and work on writing thank you cards to the people who sent sympathy notes. But it was just her presence being there helped.
Kathleen, what do you say to someone who's lost their husband? It's such a tough time for them. How do you articulate your sympathy? What do you say?
Yeah. I don't say, I'm so sorry for your loss, because that is just a saying that everybody says because they don't know what else to say, and it doesn't mean anything. So if it's a husband that I knew, I might say it was this actually happened. It was a client of mine, and he died. And the first time his wife was back with me, I said, I'm really going to miss Harry, because every time he'd come through that door, he'd have a joke to share. And I just knew that we were all going to laugh at this joke. I mean, he was such a funny guy. He was such a lighthearted guy. But he loved you so much. And that's why you don't need to worry about your finances going forward, because the two of you put things in place. He really loved you. So I might say something like that. If I didn't know the husband, because sometimes that would happen too, it would be through professional connections or whatever, I might say something like, unfortunately, I never had a chance to meet Harry. What would you like others to remember him most for? And to give her an opportunity to start sharing the stories. I think that helps a widow in her healing to talk about the stories, to talk about her husband, to talk about the memories. He's gone, but he's still alive. And like Tom, he will also live in my heart. I mean, he's always, in fact, Tom is with me right now. I'm wearing a legacy ring. I don't know if you can see this. There are several diamonds in it. My wedding ring, my ring from Tom was in the safe for many years because I couldn't decide what to do with it. When Mother died, I inherited 9 tiny little diamonds that were in a chip. She never had a solitaire because Dad was a poor farmer. And when my grandmother died, my mother had inherited her diamond. So I had Tom's diamond, my grandmother's diamond, and these little chips.
Oh, that is pretty. It's hard. It's a little hard to see on Zoom, but it's pretty.
Yeah, so I worked with a jeweler and designed that, and this is my legacy ring, and I wear it on special occasions, like doing podcasts like this, and I feel like Tom's with me, and Mom's with me, and Grandma's with me.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, so tell me this.
Oh, one more thing, Wes.
Yeah.
What to say, and if folks want to know, I mean, I got a whole lot more suggestions on my website. There's this impactful empathy book.
Okay. Impactful empathy.
Yeah, people can download that for free. And there's all kinds of things to say and not to say. Like one of the worst things that people said to me was, God needed another angel. And so Tom had to go up and be that other angel. No, I wanted the angel right here with me. Or one guy said to me, this was a couple months after Tom died, and he said, Kathleen, don't worry too much. You're still young and you're attractive. You'll find another man to marry. It's like,
What not to say?
Yes.
What not to say?
Whole collection of things, how to say things and what not to say, and suggestions about remembering on anniversary dates. I still remember it was a year after Tom's death. My kids didn't call me. Nobody contacted me except my financial planner. And I have my own financial planner because you can't be your own medical doctor, so you can't do your own financial plans. And my planner called me and said, Kathleen, I'm thinking about you today. And I know wherever Tom is, he's so proud of you right now, all the progress you've made this last year.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That is powerful. Well, tell me about that progress that you would coach one of your clients about, Kathleen. You mentioned, so we talked about this really difficult period of time. It's pain, it's loss, it's lonely, you're crying yourself to sleep. And that lasts, I'm sure, for a long time. And I don't know how long that lasted for you or how long it typically lasts. I don't know if there's a typical. And then what about when do you start making decisions? And should you not? tell me about that time frame. That's that very difficult period of time.
Yeah. And first of all, I'll say every widow's situation is unique. And I never try and say, oh, I understand. I get it. I was a widow before. I know exactly what path you're walking on, because I don't.
Mm-hmm.
It's unique. But I've found that the women that I advised, there were about 3 stages that they would go through. There was that initial shock and awe period, that when grief is just really, really raw. And on average, that's going to take several months, maybe like 6 months or so on average. And the kinds of things that she needs to do, I refer to it as, it's a term from Susan Bradley's Financial Transitionist Institute. She calls it about a decision-free zone. Not a no decision zone, but just a decision free, where you make decisions on some things that have to be taken care of, but a lot of the other things that don't need immediate attention. For example, if there are life insurance benefits to be collected, we're going to file for those and get those benefits, but not decide right away where to invest them, because she doesn't know what her future life's going to look like or what her needs are. So you get the proceeds and you park them in a high interest bearing money market account where it's safe and secure, and just let it be. Let it be. So those immediate things that have to be, getting the death certificates and funeral arrangements and memorial, or those immediate kinds of things. But the rest of the stuff you defer. And then you get through that main
shock phase.
Shock and awe phase. And in that widow's fog, or as I had some of my widow friends, they called it widow's brain period. Then you move into the second phase, which is, I call it growth. I like alliteration. So there's grief is the first one and growth is the second one. And this is where she's ready to do more traditional financial planning kinds of things. And I've had some widows that aren't ready to move into that phase. They're in that deep grief for a whole year. It may depend on like the circumstances of death. I'll give you 2 cases of widows. They're clients of mine, and husbands died in the same year. The first widow was she and her husband were in her 50s. He had taken early retirement. She worked at a big executive kind of position, loved her job. She was going to work longer, more secure financial future for both of them, health care coverage, good things like that. She went off to work one morning and she got a phone call a couple hours later, come to the hospital right away. And by the time she got there, her husband was dead. He had gone out to play tennis with buddies, doubles, that morning, and he dropped dead on the tennis court of a massive heart attack. And they didn't have any clue that he had
any sort of heart
cardiac
issues.
Before. Later in that year, another widow, she and her husband were in their late 80s. They always said that Bob was living on borrowed time. And he had a heart condition also, but they knew about it. And he died quietly in his sleep one night. Well, because she knew, this was going to happen. It was inevitable. She was more ready for it. She was older than that younger widow, but that younger widow, it took about 9 months before she was ready to move into stage 2, whereas the older widow was ready to move into stage 2 by 6 months. So
understood. So shock, then growth, and then what is the next phase?
And by the way, in the growth, you're doing the more traditional. You're investing that insurance money. You're looking at updating the estate plans, deciding if she's going to stay in her house or move to a different house, and looking at retirement plans. Then the third stage is using the GRE. I like grace,
growth, and
grace, or transformation, as some people like to call it. And not all widows go through in that stage, that's when maybe she's ready to talk about some advanced estate planning. There may be philanthropy involved if she is charitably inclined. There may be family matters. There might be a business. Maybe she's starting a new business. Maybe there's a new marriage. Right. Not all women go through all three stages. Unfortunately, there are some. None of my clients are this way, but they never move out of stage one, that deep, heavy grief. And these are women who were joined at the hip with their spouse. They just did everything together. They are probably older women. And some of these women pass on, they die within 2 years of their husband's death. And you've seen, sometimes we read reports how it's like within hours, the spouse dies, even though they were in separate floors on the hospital, but they die. Some women make it to stage 2, and they're very happy to be in stage 2. It's a safe, it's a comfortable place. It's just fine for them to be. But for the ones that make it on to stage 3, that's like a whole new life, a whole new beginning. It's a wonderful.
And that may be a year later.
That comes, that grace.
Multiple years.
Multiple. I had recorded it in my journal, and I wrote, I am much more than a widow. I am an independent woman, and I have moved forward. It was about 5 years for me.
5 years.
Yeah, to get to that.
This is a long journey.
That stage.
Well, there's a couple of questions I have. One, I know that widows change financial advisors at a high percentage rate, something like 70%. Mm-hmm. Why is that?
Well, I have checked to see if there have been an actual empirical evidence-based study on this, and there hasn't been. So I can give you empirical evidence based on my experience as a financial planner, because I got a lot of new widows that came to me. And an example was like Anne, who came to my office, and she said that her husband had died, and they had a financial planner. She said she met him when they first started working with this planner many, many years ago, but that was the last time she ever saw him.
Oh, and never met again. Why? Because her husband
got his hot tips on the golf course with this financial planner. And he'd come home and he'd say, this is what we're doing sometimes, and sometimes he'd just go ahead and do it. So she really didn't have a relationship with this guy. So after her husband dies, his office calls and schedules appointments, says she needs to come in and sign some paperwork. Okay, she'd never even been to his office before, so it was hard for her, but she figured out how to get there, and she got there. And she said the first thing he said when I walked into the office was that I should be happy because I was beating the market. She said, that's the last thing I wanted to know. He said, he didn't say anything about my husband.
It sounds like the stockbroker in the Charles Schwab commercials, like the bad broker they make fun of.
Yeah. He called him my late spouse, my deceased spouse. She said, I don't think he even knew his name. But she started crying, and he grabs a tissue and tosses it at her, and he says, don't cry your pretty little eyes out. We're going to take care of everything for you. It's going to all be okay. And she said she just lost it at that point. She got up and she left. And his office called the next day and wanted to reschedule the appointment because she hadn't signed the paperwork. She said she saw the paperwork, but she didn't understand it, and she wasn't going to sign something she didn't understand. So she told him she was busy. She had a hair appointment. And she talked to her friend Betty, who was also widowed. And she said, oh, you got to go talk to Kathleen. That's my advisor. And I think Kathleen can probably help you the way she's helped me. So I'm here, Kathleen. And I want to know, am I going to be all right financially?
And you restart, because that's a new person that you have to learn. And then you stayed with her through that whole journey.
Yep. We spent the first few times it was talking about her husband. That's all we did. And then we did things very, very slowly. I pulled out that chart, and I used that chart, that grief to growth to grace, and said, you're right here. You're on the grief end, and we're going to work through this together. And then I asked her, I said, what are your concerns right now? And all of her concerns.
What was she worried about?
Everyone, I wrote them down. She said, what do I do with his car? Okay. Do I still have to pay the bills? There are bills that come in just for him. Do I have to pay those bills? Can I still help my granddaughter? Can I help her with her college expenses? My son is talking to me about moving in with him, and I don't know if that would be the right. So everything she wanted, we wrote every single thing down. And then we went back over the list again. And I said, all right, is there anything else? Wrote it down. I said, we're going to be able to take care of all of these things and more. That's all we did. And she just like, said, I'm going to be a thinking partner along with you. I'm not going to tell you what to do.
And no wonder people love working with you so much. I get it. I want to work with you.
I'm refired. I dropped all my licenses.
What is refired, by the way? Again, what is refired? Refirement.
People say, oh, you were so smart to think of that term. I didn't think of it. It was in the year, I think it was 2000. A book came out about refirement for people aged 50 and above. And the way I found out about that book was there was a workshop that was being done for clergy who were planning to retire soon. And my husband was eligible to do that workshop, and I went with him. So it was a book that was used by Lutheran clergy around the whole country. So it wasn't used by financial planners at all. It never caught on with financial planners. But in that he was encouraging people not to just retire and fall off the ledge and enjoy fine dining and golf for the rest of their life, but to do meaningful things, to have a purpose. And they were also encouraging Lutheran pastors who were retiring then to go on and do intra-ministry positions in these little tiny churches that were shorthanded on clergy. So it was through the clergy connection that I found this book. When I read it, I thought, oh man, they're right on. And then shortly after that, Mitch Anthony came out with his book about the new retirement mentality.
Yeah.
And I liked that, that's an old book now, but the idea that, because I kind of thought, I don't know if I'm ever going to retire. Never really. So then I took that refirement name, and then I decided, all right, I want to do this with my clients, but I want us to focus on what are your values? And once you stop working for pay, how are you going to live out these values and sparkle, turn on? And so I figured out for myself, I went through, Ken Rouse had a book that he wrote many, many years ago, and it was a values inventory. And there were, maybe 20 some values, and you're supposed to pick out the top ones for you. And I did that. And then I modified that. And over the years, I've continued to modify it more. So at the point that I decided to leave my encore career, which I started after I sold my business, I did that for 6 years, and we can talk about that too. But when I closed down the encore career, so then I said, all right, I'm not really retired. I'm not going to be that golf and fine dining person. What is it that lights my fire?
By the way, what was your number one value? What was your top value?
Family. Yeah, family's forever.
So what do you do now? Tell me about you had a financial business, you sold it, you're a writer, speaker.
Oh, that was after for the financial business, I was, pretty much just financial planning clients. Then I had an invitation by a major financial firm, Protective Life. They wanted me to do presentations at national conferences for financial planners on working well with widows, not on their products at all. I had total freedom on what I wanted to do. So they trotted me around to a lot of conferences, plus a lot of conferences just brought me in on their own. Financial planners brought me in to be a speaker for their some of their client events, to work with women who were widowed already or who were looking to that time ahead. There were some foundations that had me come in and do sessions. So I kept a track of it, and it was like I did over 300 of those presentations. But then I had to stop. And Wes, I had to stop because every time it was a great presentation. It was emotional. People would cry during it. They were really connected. I had to stop because every time I gave that presentation, Tom died all over again.
Oh, so emotionally just as brutal.
Yes. And I'd planned to wind that down and the way it worked out perfect with the pandemic, because I was ended right before a month before the pandemic closed everything down anyway. So now I speak occasionally. I'm speaking in Denver at a conference next month. That's pretty rare to be speaking on purpose there. Get your word out right, Kathleen. So I'll do some of these podcasts and webinars because I can just sit in my own house and talk to you.
Nice, isn't it? It's made podcasting so much easier. Yeah. So much better to.
Yeah.
So, and then what about hope? I think you've got this very patient methodology about you. And it sounds like it can take, again, years and years and years and years. But what would you tell our audience about widowhood and hope of the future? Because I do see it, and it's just really, really hard for people to go through it. And we've all seen it, and it's just not easy.
Yeah, I can look back now, and if I was talking to Kathleen, because I had just turned 60 and I'm 75 now, 15 years ago, if I would have said to her, honey, it's going to be okay. You're going to wind up being a stronger person. You've got new adventures ahead of you. Things are unfolding that are just unbelievable. It's going to be a good life. I would never say that to a new widow now, though. Yeah. But that's the way. And my husband, Tom, before he died, I remember having a conversation with him, and I said, I want to go with you. I don't want to stay. I want to go. And he said, you can't do that. And he said, he was a very spiritual man, you need to know. He said, I've accomplished everything I was supposed to do in this lifetime, but you have not. You've got more work to do. And in fact, for you to do this work, I have to leave. And I said, what the heck are you talking about? What do you mean? What is this work I'm supposed to do? He said, I don't know what it is, but you'll figure it out after I'm gone. And
have you done that?
Yes. This is the whole. For me, change is important and new, and the things that I'm doing now, like helping congregations and foundations establish and grow their endowment funds. I'm leading a session on this Saturday for a group of folks who are coming at. We called it "What to Do Before You Kick the Bucket." Effective estate and legacy planning.
It's kind of a cute title, actually.
Yes, you have to have humor in here, and helping people with legacy writing, which I began doing myself, writing a lot of poetry and short stories, and getting some of these published, which is sort of fun. And I set up a charitable plan myself. It's a testamentary charitable remainder trust. It's pretty esoteric. In fact, that's what I'm talking about with advisors in Denver next month. And will be funded with retirement assets from my IRA after my death. And as you know, with the new Secure Tax Act, there have been some major changes on required minimum withdrawals for beneficiaries. And we used to be able to stretch out those beneficiaries.
Now it's all 10 years, right?
10 years,
come out.
right? Or
so how does this charitable remainder trust help with that? That's interesting.
All right. $1 million from my IRA will go into this trust. It will pay out for a period of 20 years, 6% income to my son, who does not have a pension program when he retires, and he has limited retirement funds right now. So it'll be a pension for him every year for 20 years.
So the IRA gets left to the trust.
Trust, you're right. And
so
because
instead of having to pay it out over 10,
yes,
the trust provisions say it can be paid out on whatever you choose, which in this case you're saying
20 years. It could have been lifetime for him. And if he dies prematurely, it'll go for my grandson. So it saves a heck of a lot of taxes. It's just, like I could do a whole session just on that, but it's just highly beneficial. And then the proceeds eventually that are left go to benefit 3 nonprofit organizations that I believe in. But just logistically here because the IRA rules are much more stringent now. Yes.
To some extent that will give him an income. The downside to that, though, Kathleen, is that if he wanted to go pull $300,000 out of the IRA, he can't do that.
And purposely, because there have been some incidences in the past where he had inherited his late father's retirement account, and all of that money was withdrawn paying a very high, that kicked him into a higher tax bracket.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's gone right now. So I want this money to be there. He's going to get some money outright, but some money every year will be there for him.
Okay. I think so. And you're speaking about that. So you're going to be in Denver, in October, November?
It's the middle of October. Yes. And I've written, if you go to my website, Jonathan Clements, he used to be the Wall Street Journal, the money columnist. He's got his own site, Humble Dollar, right now. He had asked me to write a piece on that. It's called Giving Twice. And I've written a couple of pieces on it, and I'm thinking about submitting it to, I've talked to Michael Kitces, and he's interested in maybe doing something with this too. So I like staying connected with the profession somewhat. So I do that, encouraging others to make charitable gifts for philanthropy to make this world a better place. That gives me great sense of purpose. I wake up every morning just like, okay, what are we going to do today? It's like, today, I'm talking to Wes.
Well, you're as excited as you've ever been. I mean, you're really very inspirational. And this is exactly why I thought this is a heavy topic, but you approach this with such optimism and you have so much passion for it that it makes this really difficult topic, I think, a lot more palatable, and it's very informative to our folks. Yeah.
And I have to also say this wonderful man, Charlie, came into my life 11 years ago, and we finally said, oh, what the heck, I was not going to get married at all. He was very patient with me. 3 years ago, I said, okay.
How long have you been married to Charlie?
We celebrated our 3rd anniversary last month, and he's a retired nuclear engineer, one of the smartest guys I've ever met. And he's very, very supportive of my work, and is just a wonderful family man. And we blended our families beautifully together. And I love him a lot. So see, I get to love 2 men. I get to love Charlie, and I get to love Tom.
It's a beautiful story, and it's a beautiful way to wrap up today. So Kathleen, thank you so much. What is your main website that folks can find you?
It's my name.
Just KathleenRehl.com.
And it's REHL.
KathleenREHL.com.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, you are a blessing, and it is wonderful for you to spend time with us here on the Retire Sooner podcast. And I learned a lot, and I think I think anybody that is in this situation that is a widower, a widow, and or a widower, I think that there's obviously some of this applies to them as well, that there's some real hope here. There's no flip of a switch. There's no magic elixir that this goes away overnight, but kind of just just how clear you are on that path kind of, I think, really inspires a lot of hope.
Well, thank you. And I thank you for the gifts that you've given me today, because this has been fun to talk with you. Oh, and folks could also go out and take a look at my book if they want to get a little bit more of Kathleen's philosophy. Then there's beautiful art and original paintings and photography in the book. So start by looking at the art.
Moving forward on your own. Kathleen Rehl, thank you so much. And thank you for being here on the show.
Thank you, Wes.